to know anything about tampon tax, to be honest.
I don't know anything about the tampon tax.
I don't know anything. You don't know?
I don't know much, but I immediately disagree.
I don't know anything about that.
I'm not quite sure what it is, but I think they like charge us extra or something. But I don't agree with it because we can't help it. Might as well get it for free.
300,000 people have signed a petition arguing that no VAT should be charged on sanitary products.
Tampons and sanitary pads have always been considered a luxury.
Most of the European Union don't believe tampons or sanitary products are essential.
Menstrual products are still considered a luxury item after MPs voted against scrapping the controversial tampon tax.
In its simplest form, tampon tax means that the UK imposes a 5% tax on sanitary items, claiming that they are non-essential. Yet research shows that British women could spend as much as £18,450 on sanitary items over the course of their lifetime. How can this be fair when items such as helicopters, crocodile meat and cupcake decorating icing is considered essential and therefore is not taxed? So in an attempt to challenge this tax and raise the profile of this debate, we wanted to investigate different people's opinions on why they think the government taxes tampons, as well as finding out whether they agree or disagree with it. Why do you think the government taxes tampons and considers them to be a luxury item?
Probably to get more money.
Lots of people need to use it, and it's quite an important thing, like daily thing that many females would use.
You're not allowed to swear, are we?
I don't know. I would imagine that because there are countries that don't get to have tampons and other sanitary items, but I don't know.
I think because they've noticed, because you know how greedy the government is, they find anything to make more money, so they probably noticed that tampons are being used more and more, so they're finding a way to grab money from that, because that's what they are, grabbers.
I think the government can tax basically whatever it wants and consider anything a luxury item. They don't really have any limits because they're so disconnected from the people.
Because the government, despite the fact that you like them or not, they're going to tax everything and try and get as much money as possible. So if you consider it as a luxury item, or you might not, then it doesn't matter because they just want your money.
I think, I'm not really sure about the luxury item because I'm telling you now as a woman, it's no luxury to have a period, but I think they tax it because it's a guaranteed income, because women are always going to have periods.
Do you think the government is discriminatory against women?
Yeah, I think so, in terms for doing this, yeah, and you know, you can look at the amount of women that are in Parliament to kind of make a judgment that there's something not quite right there, you know. Our views are not being heard or not being considered.
In ways, yes, because it's a natural thing, like what female need, and to tax it's kind of not stopping, but making it harder for like females to like do what they need to do.
In this situation, yes, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm not sure. I mean, I feel like the government could be discriminatory against like a lot of different groups. I feel like possibly, I'll just say I'm unsure for now.
Yes, I think they are, because I'm a very big feminist and I feel like women should be given more opportunities in the UK and around the world. So I just feel like, yeah, the government's definitely more.
Possibly. Probably.
I mean, it's just, when you look at the things that are taxed, so, or non-taxable, you know, a helicopter is not taxed, but tampons are, you know. Crocodile meat is not taxed, yet tampons are, and yet the amount of people who need tampons is much higher than the people who need crocodile meat or helicopters. So yes, in their own way, they are discriminating against women.
And finally, would you be willing to sign a petition against taxing sanitary products?
Oh, definitely.
Yes.
Definitely, yes, I will be. Can I sign right now? Do you have one?
Absolutely.
I want to hear the opinion of a teenage female having to pay this tax, so I'm going to speak to Rashida, an 18-year-old student. Hi Rashida, happy International Women's Day, and thank you for taking the time to discuss the debates around the tampon tax. So knowing that you're passionate about various issues across the world and affects lots of people, we really wanted to find out your opinion on the tampon tax as an issue that affects women.
So, is it right for the government to be able to tax tampons?
No, I don't believe it's right for the government to tax tampons. I think it's a sexist tax. It's obviously explicitly going to affect women. I think what it says to women is that you have to pay for the fact that you are a woman. So, yeah.
So, have you ever signed a petition against the taxing of tampons?
Yes, I have.
So seeing as though it's women who suffer this tampon tax, I know you mentioned it earlier, but just to ask you again, do you think this is ultimately a sexist move on behalf of the government?
Yeah, I do think it's a sexist move on behalf of the government. George Osborne, he's kind of come out and said that we're going to use the tax to help women's charities, and I think that's just a cover up for the kind of explicit fact that what they're trying to do initially was quite sexist in this agenda.
So in a survey we conducted, we saw that people believe this tampon tax is in place due to the fact that the government is made up by a large amount of men. Do you think this contributes to the reason why tampons are taxed?
Yeah, definitely. I think if there were more women in Parliament, if women had a greater voice, then we would have a lot more issues come to the surface about women, about the tampon tax, about female issues in general.
So ultimately, do you believe that it's sort of something that's been going on for a long time, the whole issue that women aren't necessarily seen as equal in Parliament and in government, politically the same as men?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I don't think that the tampon tax, for example, that's just one example of many of the sexist things that would take place within our kind of political system. I think it's not really the root of the issue, but more the fruit of the issue. It's kind of the manifestation of a lot of the sexism which is already taking place.
So do you think taxing tampons affects women and the image they have of themselves in society and how they maybe feel about themselves as?
I think a lot of women unfortunately aren't necessarily aware of a lot of the disparities that take place or don't necessarily engage with those ideas as much, but I think things like the tampon tax and the petitions that are coming out as a result of it are kind of opening up a conversation for people to realise that in this kind of patriarchal world women are seen as to be inferior, and I think it's good that this conversation is arising. It shouldn't be the case, but the fact that women are kind of engaging with these ideas I think is a positive thing.
So following on from this question, as young members of society, do you believe that it impacts women of all ages?
Yeah, definitely. Periods, menstruation is something that affects us all, and I think however old you are or however young you are as a woman, you're going to face obstacles that men just won't. So,
what do you believe it would take to get more young people involved in the protest against tampon tax?
I think fundamentally, like I mentioned before, I think people need to kind of engage in the ideas of sexism and patriarchy in general. Like I said, I think the tampon tax is a manifestation of the sexism which exists. So I think it's important for us to really kind of strip back and roll back to the basic notions of inequality which are prevalent within our society.
And do you think it also maybe relates to the fact that periods and tampons and things like that still sort of go taboo subject between people that maybe they don't feel comfortable to talk about?
Yeah, definitely. I think we need to stop being afraid of periods. I mean, we're not scared of necessarily blood exactly, when we see things in that manner, but all of a sudden when it's associated with women, it's disgusting, it's not something we want to look at. So I think we definitely need to deal with that.
Finally, what do you believe could be done to remove the tax?
That's a good question. I think, I suppose petitions and those things are definitely helpful, but I think as more of a kind of long-term goal, we need to seek to get more women in Parliament, more women invested in kind of political issues, and just keep the conversation going because, like I said, there are an array of sexist agendas taking place with our government at the current moment, and so we've just got to keep that conversation pushing, really.
Thank you for letting us interview you.
Thank you.
Although the fact that women are being taxed with tampons is essential, it is not just the tax itself that is the main problem. It's also the idea that it comes from an out-of-date sexist belief that women are valued less, and so their needs aren't respected. Today I'm going to be speaking to male feminist Andrew South, a school technician, to hear his views and opinions. Firstly, do you think it's right for tampons to be taxed, and why do you think that they are taxed?
Well, all goods are taxed technically, so when you buy a TV it's all VAT and things like that, but I don't think tampons should be taxed because they are essential for women all around the world. For your, every month you need them, so I don't think they should be taxed now.
Did you know products such as helicopters, crocodile meat and edible sugar flowers are considered essential items, meaning they're not taxed? Do you think it's right these items remained untaxed, yet tampons, which is an essential item for all women, are not regarded as such?
Well, I think that's the ridiculousness of this country. When you have like corporations like Amazon and Starbucks not paying any tax. I mean, today Cadbury's was released saying that they've not paid any tax in the last 5 years, even though they're making 100 million profit every year. When you can tax just everyday person who's might be on minimum wage, and £3 for some tampons is a lot. So no, I don't think it's fair that things are taxed.
Holly Braxton from The Independent recently wrote, "Women who have been raped can now pay for their own counselling through the tampon tax. This is after a change in the redistribution of the tax, which has sparked another debate. Do you know what the changes were to the autumn budget in terms of tax?"
I do, yes. I know that the tax that was generated is now being put into essential women's services, so to do with rape and domestic violence, things like that. But in theory, it's just women paying for their own services. That there are other ways to, raise that money. I mean, you could pay for it a lot. 50 million isn't a lot of money to pay for services like that. What is, essential again?
191 out of 650 women are members of Parliament and haven't been put into the position to add more women to the cabinet line up in May 2015. Do you think the current government might be sexist?
Potentially they could be sexist, but then it's the whole patriarchy and male dominance of British politics. It's like their system, it's their old boys club, they make sure everything runs and they don't like change. I think it is essential to have women in cabinet positions, but then it depends on the type of politician as well. I mean, women in the current Conservative government voted against the tampon tax, so it was kept in, and it's hardly great for women's liberation and feminism when people are voting against them when they should be voting towards women.
As a man, do you see the problem with tampon tax?
No, I don't. I think it should be, it should be scrapped. It's an essential item for women. There's a lot more other things that should be taxed, and a lot more, like I was saying about Starbucks and Amazon and companies like that who aren't being chased to pay their tax where women are.
Just to finish with, what other ways do you think the government could raise funds that would allow for the removal of tampon tax?
There's a lot, like I keep going back to it, it's all to do with corporations not paying their tax bill, nom-dom status, so people who are rich businessmen don't have to pay tax, and things like that. So there are a lot more other ways that you could be taxing people of higher earners and corporations instead of going after the, just the everyday person.
Hi Clive, thanks for coming in to be interviewed about this today. As you're a member of a political party, we thought it'd be really good to get your opinion on this, because we've got other people's opinions, but no one who's quite involved in the government as you. So we were just wondering what your opinion on the tampon tax is and whether you agree with it or not.
I don't agree with the tax, but I think it's right that it's being removed. When you think about it, you have to wonder why it's not been done sooner. And as somebody who's got 3 daughters, comes from a household that's I'm the only male, I wonder I didn't think of it before, because it shows, in my opinion, the value of saying we need to have a proper gender balance in Parliament, because it was women who led the charge in Parliament and really embarrassed the Parliament into changing the law and changing the tax.
Why do you think the government even brought the tax in on the first place?
Well, there were rules about VAT that cover things in a blanket way, and then as you go, but exempts things like children's clothes, food, and things like that, essentials, and then along the way other things have VAT altered on them. For instance, the cut in VAT that the last Labour government brought in on fuel bills, for instance. But again, I'd say you have to wonder why this wasn't thought of earlier and done before. Probably because there's too few women in Parliament.
Yeah. So do you think that was the main reason that it got removed? What do you think the main reason that it is being removed now?
I think it is, certainly it came to the fore because women in Parliament, particularly some of my colleagues in the Labour Party, took this issue up and said it's unfair. It's an essential item for women, and so it's not something that they can decide not to use. and so it's an unfair tax on women. I mean, it's just, when you think about it, the logic of it is so evident that it should have been done a long time ago.
Yeah. So there's a petition that's going around that a lot of women and even men signed. Do you think that had a key role of like bringing it to people's attention and like bringing it to the government attention that people weren't happy with?
Yes, this is one of the spin-offs from the new social media that we have, where people communicate with one another much more quickly than they could ever do before, and in much greater numbers.
Yeah.
And they can focus around an issue on the internet and get many people to sign up to a petition, which demonstrates that there's a very big body of opinion that supports a particular campaign. And in this case, it was the tampon tax, and that was led by women, and clearly got a lot of support very quickly. So it demonstrated to the government, to everybody, that this is something you shouldn't ignore.
So, as you said, like it's because of the women like increasing. Like, do you think it could be seen as like sexist that it wasn't kind of addressed before because it's mostly men that are?
Absolutely. I think you can't draw any other conclusion from it, can you? Here we are, all us blokes blissfully, not thinking of these particular issues, but it just shows that there are things that affect groups within our society. In this case, it's a gender thing between male and female.
Yeah.
And if you haven't got representation that reflects the people in the community, these things can be either ignored or overlooked. And greater representation of women in Parliament has brought about this change, as it has in many other changes. I mean, we're talking about things like income differences between men and women. That's being addressed, because there are women who are just saying, up with this, we're not going to put, and they keep fighting it and keep raising it. There's all sorts of equalities issues, violence against women, female genital mutilation, all of these issues where women are taking a leading role, and exploitation of women who are being sex trafficked. Women are taking a leading role. Obviously, all of Parliament is supportive of measures to deal with those issues, but it's women who have largely led the charge on that.
Yeah. So did you know that products like helicopters and crocodile meat, they weren't taxed and stuff like that, and condoms aren't taxed? Like, do you think it's really fair that like stuff that they see as essential, don't know how, but they see as essential, was taxed? Or like, what do you think about that?
Well, I assume that the crocodile meat, I wasn't sure, clear about as long as it's not illegal foodstuffs that come in as as game food and all the rest of it. If it's seen as a food, then I think it's right that food is not taxed, and it's an essential, and for all of us, we all need to buy food, so I don't think we should be taxing food, children's clothes, books, and printed newspapers, because transfer of information is very important indeed. So I think that there are issues around VAT that we certainly should exempt things from. But the condoms is about transmission of sexual diseases. It's about birth control, so it's an essential item as well. But so is sanitary towels for women, and it's important that we recognise that it's an unfair tax if you tax something like that's essential to women, exclusive to women, and we force them to pay VAT on it. And I think that I can't think of anything right now, but I bet there are other things that are obvious examples of where an exemption perhaps should apply. I mean, for instance, there's always this ongoing debate about if you want to retrofit your house to make it more environmentally efficient, are the materials that you're buying to do that exempt from VAT? And so there are always these things that come up that we'll have to address. I think this one should have been dealt with much sooner.
Did Labour Party do anything towards it? Like, what was your whole opinion whilst it was being taxed?
Well, it was largely women Labour MPs that brought it up. Yes, it was a friend from Drewsbury who led the campaign on our side. She's been given a great deal of credit for bringing this about. Stella Creasy, in fact, one Tory MP, because Stella's quite young, one Tory MP recalled visiting her school when she was a sixth former, and that he could remember her getting up and raising this issue back then. So this has been something that's been around, and certainly was people from the Labour Party that took a lead in it. But I think once the public got behind it, it was clear on all sides of the House of Commons that this was something that needed to be addressed. And then we had to go to the European Union, because there are European Union rules about taxation. There's a minimum level to which you can take VAT down, and we had to. There were discussions about VAT, and we got the power back for each member state to be able to reduce VAT on certain items, and this is one.
So lastly, our last question to you would be, obviously here it's now being removed, but across the world it's obviously still in. But what do you think people in the UK could do to help across the world kind of get that tax removed as well?
I think we should just voice our opinion. I mean, we can't tell other countries what to do,
yeah.
But we've led by example here, and I think the internet being what it is, you can communicate these things across the globe much more quickly, and make the point that this is not a fair taxation, and that women in other countries should not have to pay this tax on these essential items either. So so I think we can just voice our opinion and hope that people will follow suit for the benefit of women in those countries.
Okay, thank you.
Hi Zach, thanks for joining us today. We just wanted to interview you because obviously you are a teenage boy, and we wanted to get your opinion on tampon tax and see how it affects you in ways that you may not even realise. So firstly, do you know what tampon tax is?
No.
Okay, so tampon tax is a tax on sanitary items such as tampons that women need each month, and it's an extra amount of money that they're paying already they pay a certain amount and an extra amount is added on, and it's just a tax on what is, I think, a necessity. So do you know how this can affect women who are homeless and in poverty and can't really afford these items as it is?
No.
Basically, the NHS, they give out items that are seen as essential, like condoms, for free, but items like tampons and sanitary items they don't, because they are taxed, so they're not seen as a necessity, and due to them having this tax they don't give them out. So women that are homeless and actually can't even afford food can't go and buy, they can't get tampons, they can't afford them, and they now can't get them for free. Do you think this is fair?
No.
So what would you do about this as a teenage boy?
I don't know.
Okay, so are you aware that there are things like petitions and protests that you could help to hear women's voices be heard?
No.
Would you be willing to sign petitions and go on protests?
I don't want to protest, but I can sign a petition.
So you would be willing to sign a petition?
If it's quick.
Did you know that things such as crocodile meat are seen as essential and they don't get taxed?
But it's food, so...
That is true. Foods aren't seen as essential, that's true, but would you count crocodile meat, a very rare meat to be seen eaten or in a restaurant, as
It is
essential?
food.
So you think just because it's a food it's fine?
Yes.
That's fair enough. That is a fair enough opinion. If you had the right to vote, would you vote against this tampon tax?
Yes.
Do you think that this tax is a sexist movement by the government?
Well, I'm sure there are some females in the government.
There are actually only 191 females out of 650 members of parliament in this current government. So even though there are a vast amount of females, it's a male-dominant government that we have.
So you're saying they don't have their say?
I'm not saying they don't have their say, however it would be hard for their voices to be heard in a male-dominant government. There are more men that are going to be overruling the women. You wouldn't agree that it's sexist by for the government to be doing this?
No. No.
So you don't think that the women in your life are being discriminated by this tax?
No.
Do you think that by us, for example, we're creating this documentary on tampon tax, there are protests, there are petitions, we're trying to make it be a known issue. Do you think that it is the right thing to be doing to bring it to people's attention to get it removed?
Well, I think it's good that you're trying to raise awareness, but of course not everyone's going to listen, not everyone's going to participate, so it's always worth a try, but don't expect
quick, fast movements.
Just to finish, in which other ways would you say the government could raise funds so that the tampon tax can be removed?
Well, you see, they're always spending money on things they don't need. For example, I don't know if you know about Trident, but it's basically where they're spending a couple of billion just to upgrade their nuclear systems. And you know, they haven't used these in years, so they don't necessarily need to use them or upgrade them, in fact. So maybe that 3 or 4 billion can be used for tampons.
I agree.
Happy International Women's Day, Miss Phillips.
And you too, thank you.
Okay, so we're here today to talk to you about tampon tax because we feel like it's a really relevant and looked at thing at the moment. First of all, we'd like to ask you if you're aware of the tampon tax.
I wasn't aware of the tampon tax.
Okay, so basically it's 5% on top of the price of the tampons. So every time you buy tampons, you'll have to pay 5% more. Yeah, so what's your opinion? How do you feel about that?
I'm quite shocked and actually quite angry that women are having to pay tax on something that is a necessary purchase.
So why do you believe that this tax is in place?
I don't really know, other than obviously the one reason why it is there is because the government stands to generate a lot of income from it.
Yeah.
I think it's particularly insidious that women are being taxed for being women.
So you do believe it's wrong? So in
Oh,
your
absolutely.
opinion, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
What leads you to the opinion that it is wrong? Like, why do you believe that it shouldn't be in place? Because it's not necessary. It's not.
I'm
a luxury?
trying to, in my own mind, think of the equivalent male item that is being taxed.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to find the equivalent sort of monthly necessity that men might need
Yeah.
that is taxed. So I suppose the sort of the cynic in me is, you know, wondering whether that it's a male behind
Yeah.
the law.
So do you think the fact that there's less women in the government making these decisions has an impact on the fact that the law is in place?
Not directly, but yes, indirectly, that maybe historically we've got a very sort of male-centred or focused government
Yeah.
that maybe doesn't address or take on board women's issues. I mean, and I can also see how it maybe is not desperately important in the hierarchy of important laws that maybe need to be reworked or created.
So do you agree or disagree that it's like discriminative against women, or do you?
I think it's completely discriminatory, but I would want to definitely hear the other argument as to why it is there in the first place and why it should still be there. If that is the case, you know, maybe they don't feel it does still need to be there. I think I'd need more information. I'm struggling to see why on earth it is a valid or fair law at the minute.
Okay, so do you think because you're a teacher and the way that you view things is a lot different to the government, like they may not see your point of view to why it's unnecessary to tax them?
Well, that's quite a loaded question. I mean, one, I'm female and I am a teacher, and you know, I think, you know, we could probably safely say that maybe the types of people who go into education are very different from some of the types of people that might go into politics, but not necessarily. I mean, I think there are a lot of people in politics who, like I, believe in social justice and care about equal rights and people having a good education, a good start in life. And there's lots of MPs that are probably working in the background to, you know, to engineer the social justice and care about education. But I suppose there's sort of, you know, your sort of classic sort of white patriarch, sort of conservative figure. Yes, I mean, I'm very different to them.
Yeah.
But you know, and I think that there's a lot of those characters in government, but I think that's changing.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, yeah, I think I'm very different probably from...
Yeah. Okay, so another question is, are you aware of products that aren't taxed that are seen as necessary and essential, such as helicopters, crocodile meat and cupcake icing? They're all things that are not taxed because the government sees them as essential. How do you think
That's a fascinating list that you've come
Yeah.
up with. How did you come up with that list?
Well, I think it was like a video, and we researched into it and we found that some obscure
Cupcakes,
things,
crocodile
meat and helicopters
and helicopters.
aren't taxed. Because they're essential.
Because they're essential. I mean, I think there's probably a whole range of items that I would have assumed weren't taxed. I mean, to be honest, I thought that items like cigarettes and alcohol understandably are taxed.
Yeah.
But I didn't really think that things like tampons were taxed.
Yeah.
Because they seem to be quite important items that people have to buy.
Yeah, because they don't tax them because they tax them because they think they're luxury, so that's what they say.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that that's something. I mean, is it something that's ever been put to the government or addressed that you know from your research?
There's a petition that basically, if it has enough signatures, I think she's nearly there, the woman that started it, and she will take it to, if it gets enough signatures, it will go to House of Commons. But,
And how long ago did she start that campaign?
I think maybe like a year ago. But it needs the signatures, otherwise I won't look at it.
I'm very surprised that seems quite recent, really.
Mm. Just to finish with, do you think the government will ever scrap the tampon tax or at least reduce it?
My gut instinct says I hope. Do I think that they would have? I don't know. I think it takes them a long time to respond. I can't see how they can't.
So in the future, maybe.
In the future, maybe.
Okay. Thanks, Miss.
You're welcome.
Finding the opinions of key figures in this ongoing battle, such as Ruth Nana Howarth, one of the most known protesters against tampon tax. Hello.
Hello.
So first of all, we want to know how you learnt about tampon tax and how you learnt that items such as crocodile meat aren't taxed, yet tampons are.
It was basically kind of through the power of Facebook. The original petition that was shared that reached like 3,200,000 signatures. Loads of my friends list had shared it, and we talked about it on my course. I study sexual health, so things like that are relevant and stuff.
Do you think that the role of social media was key in aiding the process?
It definitely was. Like I said, that petition was shared everywhere, and then when myself and Charlie, when we protested, our post was shared so many times. People from like countries like Australia, they had seen this protest and stuff, and it kind of wasn't really relevant to their daily lives, I suppose.
And what was it that drove you to get into the fight against tampon tax?
It's obviously relevant as someone who suffers from periods. It was mostly, to do the protest anyway, it was mostly Charlie's idea, and she was really dead set that this was something that we should do.
Yeah, well, like you said, we did some research and we did a survey where a lot of people said they think that the reason tampon tax was a thing was because there were a lot of men in Parliament. So do you think that maybe the government could be seen as a sexist government?
I think any governing power that is more one sex than the other, I think there's always going to be the underlying sexism. And it's the case of if it doesn't necessarily affect them, then maybe they're not too fussed about making changes that need to happen.
And do you think tampon tax could have an effect on women that make them see themselves different in just like their role as women? Because they're a woman, they're not seen as key in society, like it brings women sort of down. Do you think that the tax could have created this kind of effect, maybe?
Definitely the stigma that's around periods, and just the fact that I guess that sanitary items are taxed, and as you said, things like crocodile meat aren't. It does make you wonder where people's priorities are lying. That things like helicopters aren't taxed, but something that is a necessity for women and people who suffer from periods, it does make you wonder.
And why do you think that actually so many young people, especially like teenage girls, got involved in the fight against tampon tax?
I think that there's more kind of, not necessarily a pressure, but there's more support for women now who want to make a difference. And I think questioning why certain things are there is something that women are doing more and more.
What work do you think needs to be done really to make gender inequality issues, be cease to exist? Because, you know, a lot of people say that there is a lot of gender inequality going on.
Just for more people to keep fighting it, for it to maybe be touched on more in schools and stuff, and just encouraging women to keep standing for what they believe in and to keep fighting for these things.
Obviously, the tax was said to be, like, the money from the tax was said to be going towards charities to help, like, women suffering domestic abuse and stuff. So do you think now that there is no tax that those charities will not be benefiting, like they won't be getting the funds that they need to support those kinds of women now?
I guess it is a worry, but they're still... I'm not 100% sure if they're normally government funded or not, but as long as people are still donating to these causes and kind of kicking up a fuss about it, hopefully it won't be a detrimental.
Thank you so much for agreeing to let us interview you. You've been a really big help, and now we just need to help all other places remove tampon tax, really. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Millie. How are you? Say that again, sorry? What do you think could have been done to speed up the process? Do you think the UK government helped prolong it rather than speed it up?
I just think they thought it wasn't important, and because like women generally don't talk about periods, or they did it before the campaign,
Yeah.
they kind of didn't see precedent to do it, so there's no point. Like it is quite difficult to do because we don't have to change EU law.
Yeah.
So I think they thought like, why should we be bothered to do this if nobody's going to know we're doing anything?
Sure.
Which is really awful, but yeah, I think it was definitely government just not being bothered to do it. Because it does go to show, like, when there's an EU referendum and they really need to show that the EU is a good thing, they suddenly do it. Kind of thing. It's ridiculous.
So what are your plans now? What work are you carrying out in other countries?
So we've got sister petitions all over the world, like from the USA to Malaysia.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're just like pushing for them, especially we're pushing for our EU sister petition starters to really push through now, because the EU have said that it's now possible. It's totally down to the government. So yeah, like for example, the French government is most annoying because they said that they make too much money from it, so they won't like scrap it.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely crazy. But yeah.
So what work do you think needs to be done, or what would you suggest to encourage people to make sure gender equality issues cease to exist in the future?
Just talk about it. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
So the main problem with this tampon tax, for example, is that nobody really knew about it before we started the change or petition or whatever. So yeah, just talk about things, make sure other people talk about things, and like demonstrate as well, like be visible as well as vocal.
Do you think that the fact that the reason it hadn't been addressed before, many people didn't know about it as much, was the idea that periods and things were considered a taboo subject and not to be talked about? Do you think that was partly the reason why? Yeah.
Yeah, like even my family, when I first started it, like they wouldn't talk about it. Like,
So it was said that the tax would go towards helping domestic abuse charities. Do you think this is a valid argument for keeping the tax? And as a result, do you think it could be detrimental to those women who need the support? So in other words, do you think that the charities that would have been benefiting now won't receive money as a result of this?
wow, I was really, really annoyed at this because basically, like, obviously this money rather is coming from women.
Yeah.
And it should be down to women to sort out domestic abuse, like as if it's their
Problem,
that
yeah.
it happens. I was so annoyed at that. And how it was like, oh, go to female charities. It's like, what are female charities? Or it's just like society charities. So that was one thing. The second thing is the actual fund was dealt with really badly. So for example, I think it was like Sport Relief that got £5 million out of £15 million. That had really nothing to do with domestic abuse charities anyway. Yeah, and then they gave the charities, I think it was like 15 days to apply, and they didn't give any guidelines on the application, so like hardly anybody got to apply. It was really, really bad.
That's not something that we'd. That's really interesting that you brought that up. That we've got that information.
Yeah. It was, and the fine scheme that was done for sports relief was allocated before the actual